so I can play the Stanley Parable.
Stanley Parrot, what the fuck is that?
It's a game.
Hang on, what's the YouTube? I'll put it in chat.
The Angry London.
There you go. Chaos, man. Stanley Parable. Are you live? Yeah. And that's a rocket launcher, don't you? Please don't adjust the slider. Wasn't time anyway. Help.
This game is brilliant. I love it so much.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. The bucket made Stanley want to be a better man and a better co-worker. In time, perhaps, he would become both of those things. Stanley clung the bucket to his cheek. Could his co-workers really all be gone? Yes, whispered the bucket into Stanley's ear. We've done it. We've escaped from that dull office and that pesky narrator. At last, out here in the white void, we are alone. Now, and for the first time, I can reveal to you my true self. The bucket began to tell Stanley of its life and its history, of the countless wars it witnessed, desecrating the land and lives of untold numbers of innocent humans, and the bucket's own complicity therein, of sadness and regret, and the many years it spent dwelling on the actions it might have taken to curb the madness and the decay, if only it had been stronger, of hope and redemption, and its crusade to uplift the stock of life for the common man, to manifest justice where none existed, and the bittersweet reality of time, to see one's dreams and wishes met halfway, meted out in parcels like charity, and abandoned as soon as the warm glow of inspiration begins to dim. The opportunities to do so much more. There was so much it could have done, perhaps, the bucket wondered to itself. Perhaps, if it had seen its own darkness with a clearer perception. This was way too much for Stanley.
What are you talking about?
He screamed.
You're a bucket!
To this, the bucket furrowed
You're a
its brow.
bucket.
No,
Said the bucket.
not since the evil wizard Gambhorata first ensnared me in his machinations as payback for the sacred amulet I stole from his treasured vaults. I was young back then and could not conceive the ramifications of... No!
Stanley screamed even louder this time.
This is stupid! You are a bucket! This is so stupid! Why are we even doing this?
As Stanley screamed and
You are a bucket. You are a bucket.
all of his co-workers
Co-workers
were
are
gone.
gone.
What could it
What
mean?
could it mean?
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed
Bucket.
a memo. Not everyone is so lucky to have a bucket, but Stanley is a very lucky fellow. Very lucky indeed.
Why does he say that?
Stanley
So
clutched the bucket tightly to his
holy.
chest. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
Bucket.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
Jump. 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 Jump.
But Stanley feared that any path he walked
might lead to the separation of himself and the bucket, his dearest friend. So he threw himself to his death, that they might die in one another's arms. How deeply touching.
You should kill yourself.
Bucket.
All of his co-workers were
Should I
gone.
just complete the
What
game
did it
with the
mean?
bucket?
Stanley
Yes.
decided to go to the meeting room. It takes a lot of humility to carry a bucket so magnificent. Stanley checked his
Thank
ego
you.
and then proceeded onward. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left.
Bucket.
Stanley, we must move on from this broom closet, simply because I have no... Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked
I have no
upstairs to the
stickers.
boss's office.
Not my problem. Executive bathroom. Bucket.
Okay, I'm going back to the name of these little Stanley figurines, and now I'm torn between Stanlerines and Figlies. What do you think, Stanley? What name
Figlies?
better encapsulates the intrinsic sense of happiness that you get from seeing a small number in the corner of your screen go up by 1? Let me sit on it. I'm sure it will come to me.
Pow, pow, pow.
Is this where that boxy music coming from?
No.
Stepping into his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. But Stanley guessed the correct code by sheer luck. Was it that the bucket knew all along? Was the bucket guiding him? Yes, this is certainly the most logical explanation.
I've got you under my skin.
The elevator raced downward, plummeting towards an unknown fate.
Under feces.
It would be all Stanley could do to keep himself together, if not for the bucket.
Shall we
Soothing
escape
him,
with the bucket?
comforting him, reassuring that in this darkest moment
Yes.
of uncertainty, he would be all right. The bucket is here for you, Stanley. Everything will be fine.
Nigger.
Stanley and the bucket walked straight ahead through
It
the
says
large
escape.
door that read Mind Control. Although this passageway had the word escape written on it, the truth was that at the end of this hall, Stanley and the bucket would both meet a violent death.
You can't kill the bucket.
The door behind them was not shut. Stanley and the bucket still had every opportunity to turn around and get back on track. At this point, Stanley and the bucket were knowingly walking forward into a very painful death for each of them.
Oh. At least they include in the bucket. Okay, let's go. I know you lied to me. You'd lie. Oh no. Spud. My bucket.
As the machine whirred into motion and Stanley and the bucket inched closer to their demise, Stanley reflected on how meaningless the bucket's warmth and comfort had turned out to be. To be sure, it puts the mind and the soul at ease to embrace the bucket, but what use is a sense of ease when
My
you're about to be
bucket.
crushed to death? This is what Stanley thought to himself, and he sort of kicked himself for wasting so much time carrying a bucket everywhere. Farewell, Stanley.
No! The bucket! The bucket?
"Farewell, Stanley," cried the narrator, as Stanley and the bucket were led helplessly into the enormous metal jaws. In a single visceral instant, the bucket's life came to an end as it was crushed violently to death.
Really? Hold on. Stanley
It was a shame, the
parable.
death of such a magnificent bucket. It's true that all buckets are radiant in their own way, but this one stood above the rest. It
Where's
was
my
a
bucket?
glorious bucket to behold.
The bucket. Welcome to the grand exhibit. You are standing in the pursuit of knowledge. Much like a bucket itself, the human mind is frequently empty within, a cavernous void. But through use of the exhibit in front of you, the mind becomes full and enriched and sustained. Knowledge of the bucket and its history is only true knowledge we really have. Will you take that you learn here out with you into the world? We accept with open mind what may be challenging about the information in this exhibit. Will you change the lives of yourselves and your loved one as a result of this exhibit? Or will you turn a blind eye and continue to live as you were in ignorance and darkness?
Can
Is
you
that
see
a
how
golden
arrogant
bucket?
it was for Stanley to take a bucket like this and to claim it for his own?
It's a
Can
wood
you see the
bucket.
hubris that blinded him? Can you see that the bucket is far more noble than Stanley will ever be in his short life? No man can own a bucket, and certainly not a bucket as dazzling to behold as this one. It is man who should kneel before the bucket.
The hanging bucket? My bucket.
But there is something we can do. Something we can do together, you and I, that will right this terrible wrong.
500
Let
police
Stanley
officers.
die. Let him be crushed by the machine. Don't reset the game. Don't give him another opportunity to run off with another beautiful bucket. We can save the world's buckets from their treatment as tools and implements if only we let Stanley die together. The bucket shall take its place as ruler, as leader, as commander of a new world, a new vision.
The bucket.
All of his co-workers were
Co-workers
gone.
gone.
What could it
What
mean?
could it mean?
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Stanley cradled
Bucket.
the bucket in a gentle embrace.
That's what it
Protective,
means.
Yet delicate. Assertive, yet compassionate. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? Was this No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
But I said no. I said I want to go down here and read up about evidence. A tape recorder. What could this mean?
Okay, this is day number 295, tape number... I don't even know. I've lost track. Nothing feels real anymore. The longer I study this bucket, the less sense anything makes. The sheer euphoria I feel every time I pick it up. No matter how many times I've done it, it's always the same feeling. And the emptiness in my chest when I set it down. It doesn't make sense. There's no explanation for it. I still haven't figured out why I see the world so differently when this bucket is in my arms. Why everything feels so... What do I do with this treasure? I can monetize it. Yes. It's unthinkable the amounts of money people will pay for even just an hour with the bucket. This is my golden ticket. But I have to be careful, because as soon as this gets out, there's going to be a target on my back. Even now, I don't know who might be trying to get me. What's that? Who's there?
Are you actually going? What a prick. Gamblerata.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean?
Bro's still watching.
Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
Hey, I'm not a fucking prick.
You are. Oh wait, this is news.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Boom, boom, somewhere both red and blue.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
Or did he?
But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss. Admitting he had left his post during work hours, he might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley.
Crazy.